Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Behind the Visual, that podcast where I introduce you to all those people responsible for the images and videos you see out in your world every single day. I am your host, advertising and lifestyle photographer Mark Hansen, and today my guest is Mary Dail. Mary is the owner and creative director at Big Leo Productions. They represent all kinds of artists and talent, from stylists to photographers. We talk about all kinds of stuff. We talk about how Mary got started, how she ended up in New York and working at Martha Stewart Living and didn't even know who Martha Stewart was at the time. So that's interesting. We also talk about how she ended up leaving there and eventually becoming an artist rep, a photographer's rep, and then opening her own agency. She gives us a little advice on how to find a rep, what you need if you're looking for a rep, and the relationship between a rep and an artist. We talk about a shoot that they had negotiated usage on, got paid for, and then the client changed their mind on the usage and wanted less usage and wanted their money back. So she tells us a little bit about how that all worked out. Also, another story about a shoot where the photographer went in on a big shoot, the pre-production meeting, and was shocked by how many people were actually in the meeting and all the details they were talking about, to where he was wondering if they thought he could shoot it or not. And I think it was just a normal production meeting, but it was his first one ever. So lots of cool little stories. Also, the importance of treatments. If you know what one is, we'll talk about how important those are. If you don't know what it is, you need to check this one out. So anyway, lots of cool information on this one. Let me know what you guys think. Like it, thumbs up it, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. And I look forward to hearing how much you guys love this one. Tell me where you grew up. I want to know, did you grow up in New York? Did you grow up around artists, that kind of thing? Or did this something just come differently?
No, I grew up on the coast of North Carolina. So I am a North Carolinian as well. I grew up in Jacksonville, North Carolina. And obviously, Jacksonville is known for being a military town. You say Jacksonville and everyone assumes Florida. They're like, Florida? Like, no, Jacksonville, North Carolina. And it is the home of Camp Lejeune, big military base. And my grandparents, both my grandmother and my grandfather, were Marines.
Oh, wow.
Which is amazing. Until we buried my grandmother, we didn't even know that she had increased rank several times. So it was
really?
Like, by the time I came along, they were both retired. But my grandmother was definitely a big, idol for me. But yeah, so they retired there because it's by the beach and raised their family there. And then they had 3 sons and my mom. And my mom's the only one who didn't go into a branch of the military. And I said, Mom, if you had just gone into the Coast Guard, we would have covered them all, because each one of my uncles was Army, Navy, Air Force. My grandparents were Marines. And I was like, we should have done the Coast Guard. Checked off the whole list. So, but yeah, that's where I grew up. And my mom is still in Swansboro and my sister lives in High Point. So I'm back to North Carolina all the time.
Lots of North Carolina connections then.
Exactly.
Was anybody so it sounds like tons of military. So was there any artistic thing going on there?
No, I think I found a lot of that in school. I was such a fan of school, and my mom was always baffled by that, because she was not. She did not have a good time in school, and I found real cranial refuge in school. I really dove in. It was very, straight A's, all of it. I was that nerdy kid that wanted the extra credit. 100 wasn't enough. I needed the extra 2 or 4 points. So when I'd come home with like 104, my mom and my dad would be like, how does one get above 100, And if I got a 99, I'd freak out. And I think I got a 93 once, and I came home and my dad was like, how dare you? I'm just kidding. Like, really, seriously. But for me, I had was meltdown time. But
like my youngest daughter, she's very, very similar.
Well, I found theater in high school, so I feel like that's kind of was the birth of some of my creative stuff. I loved theater. In fact, moved to New York to be an actor and a set designer.
Really?
Because I loved set design. So in high school, I went off to UNC Chapel Hill after and started as a chemistry major with double major in theater, and just really like, what am I going to do with that? What exactly am I going to do with those two things? And I think when I hit biochemistry, I was kind of like, yeah, theater. I think I'll go theater. I'll go this way.
I've heard biochemistry at Chapel Hill is ridiculous.
Yeah, it was, it was intense. And I think if I had really thrown myself into it, I would have been fine. I'm still really fascinated with science, and I love physics, and I see a lot of that in my son too. He's definitely going to be a science kid. He's an engineer, at least, because he's very mechanically inclined. And, right now.
Son has great hair, by the way.
Oh, he's got his dad's hair. I mean, I think he's got a good mix of both of our hair. We both had red tones, although you can't tell anymore. Let it all gray. But yeah, he has pretty spectacular hair.
Yeah, he does.
And it's reddened up a lot because when he was born, it was quite blonde. Mm-hmm. Which I guess is the Swedish side of him. And then my husband had pretty reddish hair. So now it's getting that beautiful red tones. In the sun, it looks just glorious.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
Nice. Okay, so you went to theater. So you changed over to theater?
Yeah. So in Chapel Hill, I studied theater. And, I feel really lucky because I was this, little freshman coming in, didn't know anybody. I had some friends there, but nobody that went into theater, and I had like a work study program, and I was looking for just anything. And lots of it was like a receptionist at the library or this or that. And I ended up seeing this position. Actually, I don't think it was a position yet, to be honest. Let me rewind. I think I was looking for the theater on campus, and there are two. There's the professional regional theater, which I knew nothing about. And there was the university theater for the program. So I walked up to some football player. And I was like, do you know where the theater is? He's like, oh, it's that way. So I rolled my freshman butt into the professional regional theater, not knowing where I was.
Oh, wow.
And they were in the middle of a rehearsal. And, it kills me that I can't remember the show, but they were rehearsing. And that theater has a center vom. So you come up the middle and then the sides.
Oh, yeah.
So I just kind of walked straight up and I watched for a minute, and they broke. And the stage manager, yelled down, "Oh, can I help you?" And I was like, I'm looking for a job. I mean, that's really all I said. And she just started talking to me, and she said, "Do you know how to be on book?" And I was like, "What's that?" And it's essentially when you're holding the script, and when an actor is rehearsing, they call for the line.
Right.
And then you recite it to them. So I was like, "Oh, sure, I can do that." So I sat there for a couple hours, and she was like, we don't have a work study program in this department, but we should. And so they created it for me.
Oh, wow.
Which I thought was such a blessing. And I feel like that's happened to me throughout my career and life. It's why we'll get to this part too, but I like to mentor and give back, because I feel like just things have just sort of aligned really well. So that happened. And I found myself from freshman year on really connected to the professional regional theater. And that was an MFA program. So it was either the MFA students, and then they would bring in guest actors from New York and sometimes famous people. So I felt very fortunate. And then my sophomore year, I found the regular theater. And so everyone thought I was a freshman because they had seen me. I was like, no. And then they were like, oh, you work with Playmakers? Then I was like the badass for a minute. But then we all kind of grew into being connected to the theater. So it started there, and we all had to do our due diligence by running crew. So you had to go into wardrobe and sets and help build props and sets for the shows that were being put on at Playmakers. So the wardrobe, my best friend was all into wardrobe. I couldn't stand it. And then when I got into the set shop, man, I felt like this is my jam. Really? I loved running crew. I loved the set stuff so much. So we were building props, sets, taking them down. It was so much fun. So when I moved to New York, I really thought that I was going to be an actor and like a set designer. And I did act for quite a bit when I first got to New York.
So did you go straight to New York out of college? Did you graduate and boom, right up to New York?
Boogied right up there. Yes, I did. And so that's what I thought my path was going to be. So I did do that for quite a bit when I first got there. And of course, like everyone else, I go to a Brooklyn cafe and I'm like, are you hiring? And then suddenly I'm waiting tables at, Second Street Cafe in Brooklyn and running an environmental store. But I went on a national tour for two different ones for a year. And there was a break in between. And it's where I met my best friend on the first tour. who was kind of one of the reasons my agency is named what it's named. So we're both Leos, and very early, our birthdays are 2 days apart. So his is the 11th, mine's the 13th. And we would celebrate on the 12th. We're like, oh, this is same age day, because he's technically a year younger, but on that day we're the same age. So
okay,
all the same age. But anyway, we started throwing a Leo bash at some point later in our kind of diverged paths, and we called it the Leo Bash, and it was very successful and fun. We wanted to bring together creative communities. He was in internet advertising, still is. He's at Google.
Oh, wow.
And the next year we called it the Big Leo Bash. And so when I started my agency, I remember thinking, I know everybody calls this their name, and like Marydale Reps or Marydale Production. So I was that for a hot minute, and I said, I have a cool name. I like my name.
Yeah.
But I just wanted it to be branded outside of myself a little bit and create this really cool brand around the artists, because it is about the artists ultimately. That's my dog shaking.
Yeah, mine's asleep on the chair over here.
Yeah, he just decided to. He's doing the back roll thing.
Oh, yeah.
And shaking the collar. And it would drive me nuts when Loki was a baby, because that damn collar shake. I'd be like, no, don't wake up. Don't wake up, Loki.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's cute.
What kind of dog is it?
Oh, he's a pit mix. I actually did his DNA, which I thought was fascinating, because he's gonna come up kind of halfway.
Oh,
there he is.
Oh, wow.
Come here. He's a pit mix, half Amstaff, and then I did his DNA, and we found out he has Kai Ken in him, which I had never really heard of. It's a Japanese breed, but when you look it up, it all makes sense. I was trying to guess. I'm like, oh, he's part pointer. Oh, he's part this. And it was really cool to do that, because it all came together. He's actually got some beagle in him too, which for his behavior outside with deer and other stuff, I was like, there it is.
Okay.
And he's got some Australian shepherd and a stumpy-tailed cattle dog, which is very cool looking. That's where all the spots come from. He's got spots cut underneath. Yeah, so he's a super cool, sweet.
There he is. Wow. Yeah. Mine's just a lab.
Labs are cool. They're the sweetest family dogs ever.
Yeah, she'll follow you to the bathroom.
What?
She'll follow you to the bathroom.
Oh, he does too.
Yeah.
He comes in and he sits. If the door is even cracked, he pushes it wide open.
What you doing?
Wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.
And his name is Picasso, and he's a sweetheart. And he heard
his name.
He's coming back now, because I said his name. But yeah, I'm a big fan of pits. I think they've obviously gotten a bad rap, and I feel like I'm a fan of all the ferocious things. Here I am, big Leo, the lions. I like pit bulls. I'm a shark fanatic.
Really?
Yeah, I just think that sharks, same thing. I think sharks are just incredible creatures, and also same thing, bad rap. So I guess I always root for the underdog. Maybe that's why I'm an artist rep.
Maybe, that's for sure. Did you see Shark Week with Snoop Dogg narrating?
Yeah.
That was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, Shark Week was always my jam. But big fan of sharks.
So, okay, how long were you in New York doing the set thing and the acting thing and the waiting thing before you were just like, this isn't working?
Well, I don't think I ever said it wasn't working. I think what happened was I found something that I also became passionate about. And that was at some point, so I want to say like 3 years. I moved to New York in 95. By 98, I had found this temporary position that was available at this magazine called Martha Stewart Living that I kind of, if I'm being honest, had never heard of. Yeah. And I remember asking this recruiter, Martha, is she a chef? Like, I didn't know. Right. I don't know if I should admit that on camera, but I really didn't know a whole lot about her and her whole empire. And it definitely grew while I was there. I mean, it definitely took off in a whole different direction because she went public, was expanding all of her retail empire too.
Oh yeah.
So it was an amazing time to be there. So
did you ever see her?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I got this temporary gig, and essentially the photo department needed some help with film archiving, and so also some billing. It's something I can understand now as like a single business owner with a small group of employees. looking at this woman who is a mentor for me. Her name is Heidi Posner. She just showed me everything I could possibly ever know in photography. I'm still learning every day, but great start with her. I could see how overwhelming it was, how quickly that department was growing, because just even the billing was out of control. So I came in and just helped with some archiving, film, good old film, cutting it, leaving it, that back in the day. And then just billing, like stuff we would get sent from film development houses like Lens and Repro, or artist bills too. And I think that side of it is what started to connect me to the photographers, being like, oh, there's a person on the other side of this bill that needs to get paid, and going through it. And at some point I became such an advocate for artists internally that I was like, well, I might as well, I'm kind of repping the artists in here. But so that's how I started there. And when that sort of term was up, Heidi was really generous and said, I think there's another department that could probably use some help. And she turned me over to like the Kmart retail department, where I was helping another executive there, until she actually created a full-time position for me. So going back to that theater thing, I was like, things just, it was, and I do take any job I have very, very seriously. I take a lot of pride in what I do. Back at the cafe I was working at, I was made the manager in 3 months because I gave a shit. If you look on my Instagram, it says I give a shit. I just give a shit about what I'm doing. And if I am doing anything with my time, I'm going to give it everything I have. So, that's what I tried to do at Martha Stewart. I just gave everything I had. I was so eager to learn. There was an education stipend that nobody was using. And I said, well, I'll use it. So I took tons of classes at ICP. Just so that, whatever I was doing, I knew what I was talking about. And I really wanted to learn, whether it was when people were talking about stops and film, I was like, I want to know what everything is. So Heidi was very generous in letting me learn that.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And I just was recently talking about an epiphany moment that I had on one of the clubhouses that I do. I do a clubhouse every Tuesday with a group I co-founded with Tracy Terrett called Focus on Women. And I had an epiphany moment at Martha Stewart that I think launched everything for me. It was a click moment of being just engaged in photography and knowing that this was something I wanted to do. She, we always called in portfolios and we were always looking for new talent. And I called in this photographer's portfolio, opened it, was perfect for us. And, I'm looking through it, like beautiful interiors, beautiful food, like just everything we do. And I was so excited to bring this new person to Heidi, my boss, because I was like, I found someone amazing. And she's flipping through it and she's kind of like, meh. And I remember thinking, oh my God, what am I missing? And she looked at me and she's like, yeah, we already do this. And I went, oh my God, this light bulb just like exploded. I went, right. We need to be looking for like the next thing, like something new, something fresh. I was like, oh, it's like the art part of all of it hit me. Commerce part was easy. It was like, we have this magazine. We need to be hiring people to shoot this magazine. That part was straightforward, but the art part of it, that's when it clicked for me. It was when I thought I had it, and I brought it in and she was like, yeah, we already do this. And I went, oh my God. So I think that's when I kind of decided, okay, I like this. I could do this. So, yeah.
So so when you started working there, did everything else go away, the theater thing, or were you still doing that on the side as well?
I did some print modeling still. I remember, and Heidi was really great. Sometimes she would let me have a half day to go do a job or an audition or something. So I dabbled in it, but I really just got so consumed by this new thing that I let it go. But I remember I got booked on an IKEA ad and I walked in and I was like, John, it was like a photographer that we shot with at Martha Stewart. I was oh my gosh. So it was really funny to have those worlds collide. But I want to say that was one of the last things that I did. And then, launched into.
So how long were you there?
I was only there 3 years. And I probably would have stayed longer. I had a really great relationship with an artist rep who wanted to start an emerging division. And, we talked on and off for weeks and weeks and weeks. And I realized, again, this idea that I'm already advocating for artists here know, maybe I should look at what's on the other side and work for artists directly. And so I was super excited and was, you know, I admitted, I said, listen, my weak spot is going to be advertising. I've been here in magazines. I'm really, I don't know how to, at the time, you know, I was really young. I was like, I don't know how to negotiate usage. I don't know any of that stuff. So I have a learning curve here. And all of that, that was before I left my job. All of this was clear. It's like, I don't know this part, but I know this part very well. I'll use all the resources available to me. But I'm a fast learner. We know this. I'm gonna look at my history. Well, finally I took the job and I was like, you know, Martha Stewart's great. I think I've learned everything I can there right now. I'm going to try this new thing. And I got there and 6 weeks later, she was like, you know, I don't think I thought this through. I don't think this is right. And I was like, what? I was just completely blindsided. I'm like, I just left a job that I really loved. And and it could have been a mix of things. Maybe I wasn't experienced as she needed me to be, but whatever it was. But I definitely was not expecting a 6-week trial.
Yeah.
You know, I thought it would be, hey, let's see, you know, what you can learn. And so anyway, another really good rep friend of mine kind of came in and saved the day, rescued the whole situation, and was like, you know what, why don't you start that with me? And so I worked with her. I thought it was actually longer than it was. The other day I was like, oh, it's like under 2 years, but I think it was less than that. I think it was only a year.
Really?
But I learned a lot from her. Yeah. She's like, I mean, actually her name I'll say because she's a really savvy businesswoman. It's Cornelia Adams.
Yeah. I've
and
heard her.
And now she calls herself CA1, CA2. And the CA2 was the part that we started once I started working there. It was like this division and this division.
Okay.
And she's just an incredible businesswoman. And she's been around a long time. I think she started in advertising. So she was great. She took me to meetings, showed me kind of how to interact with art producers and all of it, which is what I needed. I needed a little bit of like, this is the side of the business I've never seen. I've gone to SPD awards, all this stuff for magazines, nothing for advertising except for internal. Martha Stewart is a nice little comfortable place in that way because everything is contained, or at least was at the time, contained in-house. You know, all the catalog was in-house, magazine was in-house, advertising was in-house. So we were all insulated with the prop room and the studios and all that stuff all those resources were available. So this new world of having to source outward was new. And I really appreciated her guidance there because it was new to me too.
So did she help you? Is that where you learned to negotiate the fees and the usage and learn all about all that stuff that's still irritating as hell?
Yeah, she definitely taught me a lot about the business side of repping, and it was just completely invaluable. I still think I'm still learning. There's like learning to be had, an evolution every day in this business because, you know, things change all the time. So even when I went off on my own, I was still learning.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think so too. Like, do you remember the first time you had to do a treatment?
A treatment?
That just come out of the blue? Because for me, it did. I had no clue. And luckily I had a producer who was like, hey, this other person you're bidding again just gave me this treatment. You need to do one if you want to have a chance with this.
I feel like it did come out of the blue for me because it was such a video staple. Like that's something that just happens in video. And I just think that once motion and stills started to hybrid a little bit, I feel like suddenly there was, you know, this need for that. And it came with one of the first video, you know, motion and stills person I repped. I was like, okay, we've got this treatment that we have to do. And I had to do a lot of research, like how are they put together? How do you, what does your voice have to sound like? And is it your brand? And do you speak more to the client or more to yourself? It was a whole thing, you know, trying to figure out what the heck is a treatment. But I'm really happy to know about it and to be able to do them successfully now, because I do think they're an important aspect of turning in your estimate.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, for sure. Yes. Yeah. I think it helps for sure to kind of differentiate you at least a little bit from.
Well, if you think about it, you know, if someone's got a sea of numbers on their desk in black and white, different photographers, your differentiator is your approach and who you are. So that can come in the form of a treatment. It can also come in the form of, you know, I'm trying to encourage all my artists to do more on camera stuff. I know it's terrifying for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But even
We're
if it's
photographers for a reason.
yeah, being behind,
Yeah.
for sure. But I think getting a little bit out in front of the camera, and even if it's just you behind the scenes, somebody shooting you, but then your voice just talking over that. I think that it's something I've encouraged a lot because people tend to retain what they hear and see more than what they read. So I think when they have to read through something, I think it's a lot, and they've got a lot on their plate too. So whatever makes it easier for the receiver, that's what we're
that's smart.
Yeah.
So how long before you started your own agency?
It was pretty quick. I mean, I was with Cornelia about a year. Yeah, for some reason it feels like 2, but I think I was with her a year, and then I was Mary Dail Productions for a year. And then I realized I really needed to, button things up, create a brand. And that's when Big Leo was born. I just called my best friend. We were still having the Big Leo Bash every year, every summer. So I called him and I said, hey, I think I'm going to steal the name of our event for my agency. And he's like, cool.
That's good. So what made you go with production as opposed to something else? So why not Big Leo agency, Big Leo reps, whatever?
I thought about that. I definitely had moments of like, I even thought about Mary Dail management and stuff like that in the beginning. And I think it's because my roster was so small in the beginning that I was doing a lot of both. Okay. I could handle that when it was, 4 or 5 people.
Right.
Doing both. And I also wanted that opportunity for growth and diversification down the road if we were going to bring on production and that sort of stuff. And just to keep it broad. It can be confusing though. Sometimes clients are like, oh, can you guys produce this? And I'm like, well, yeah, if it's part of the job, we don't do it on a one-off. We do it for the artists we rep.
Right. How many photographers or artists did you start off with? Photographers, or did you start off with stylists, or how did you start off, and how many of them came with you when you first started?
So you mean from the other agency?
Just in general, like, so the day you opened your agency, where did you get your artists from?
Yeah, a lot of them were part of my division with Cornelia, and then the 2 of them were people I'd met through Martha Stewart, who came to her with me from Martha, like our relationship. And I said, I'm with Cornelia. And then when I started my own thing, they came with me. And then I just interviewed artists and ended up with a good group of 5 to 6 people. And I remember some of them were a little more fashion than I'm doing now.
Right. And
I realized it just wasn't my world. I gave it a good go. And then after a while, I sat a couple of them down and I was like, listen, I don't know that I'm the right person for this world. I mean, Numero and all those amazing magazines, that's not my wheelhouse. I can look at them all day, but I'm out here for the commercial stuff. And
probably more difficult to really make money at that, isn't it, with the fashion?
Yeah, and I think one artist that I repped, my God, I loved his work, and he just had such a creative angle to his fashion, and we were trying to get him in front of creative directors to inspire, this notion that I had from the past, like you inspire people with something new. And it actually was pretty hard because in the commercial realm, people do want to be inspired, but then they literally need to see that you can do what they need you to do. Yeah. So it's like, how we all talk about producing the job before you get the job. Yeah. And that is true. And so it was so hard for me. It was heartbreaking for me because this guy, man, he's still shooting, and he had a whole other side of his photography, which was interiors, which he just didn't want to do, which I respected, but his fashion stuff was just a mix of fine art, and it was beautiful, beautiful stuff. And I know he's still doing it. And I still love his work, but I just couldn't make it happen. Right, yeah. I was like, listen, I got to do right by you. I'm not doing you a service by not getting you work. So, but I mean, he's still a really good friend. I introduced him to his wife.
Okay. Well, I think that's good because I have a friend who he's not doing it anymore. He's retired, but he's kind of the opposite of you. His whole world was fashion and beauty. And I met him forever ago and we became friends, and he kept teasing with the idea of repping me. And then when he kind of let it go, his main photographer ended up dying. And he was like, well, let me see what I can do with you. He just didn't know anybody. He's like, the world of what I'm shooting is like totally separate from the fashion beauty world. He was just like, it's not working. he just didn't understand, or didn't have the same kind of connection. So I can see how those are two totally different places to be, two worlds to be in.
Yeah. I think the one place it converges for us a little bit now is that we do rep beauty product photographers, but
Okay.
I think anything we would represent in that world would just literally be beauty, and not classic like Lancome beauty. I think it would be more like these up and coming fun, like Glossier and like those types of brands, because their lifestyle is just a little cool. It's cool. It's not as structured. That
Right.
classic beauty is just high end retouching and
Mhm.
it's very high end. And I think some of this stuff that's a little more real and fresh and vibrant, that's kind of the vibe we have with even the beauty photographers we rep. So I've got my eye on two beauty photographers. I'm always like, I don't know how to make that work, but it seems like a
Right.
good tie-in with beauty product.
Yeah, I would think. Maybe
Yeah.
it'll work out.
Yeah, we'll
Hopefully.
see.
Do you remember like your first big job you were ever on?
I do actually. Actually, there's a couple of them. I want to say there was a big Bounty paper towels campaign, and I mean, and that was a small job in that it was tabletop. It did involve talent. I've got plenty of the early ones with talent,
Yeah.
primarily kids, because they were big productions for Johnson and Johnson.
Oh, wow.
But the Bounty one, I remember it being a good education for both me and the photographer who got the job, because he was a still life photographer. Now he's doing lots of amazing interiors, but at the time he wasn't pulling back so much. And just this meeting about with 10 people at a table talking about the dots, the absorbency dots in the paper towel. It was intense. And I remember him leaving being like, do they not think I can do it? I mean, they needed them all to be in focus.
Right.
Every single, that's their brand, is those dots are the reason that stuff is the quicker picker upper or whatever,
Right. Yeah.
So I think for him having that huge first ad job was, wow, this is intense. All these people show up. I'm like, yeah, because there's a lot more money on the line. So people are showing up. It's the account people, client services, the art producer, the creative team. And then we've got the client there too. So I remember him just being like, oh my God, this is a lot of people for a paper towel shoot. I'm like, I know.
Yeah.
They wanted the paper towels to be in the same scene with like Jonathan Adler pieces and stuff that was very designed so that they could make Bounty seem very high-end design. But it was a fun shoot, and it was a good one to start with because it didn't have like locations and talent and all that stuff. But then we did get into one of my kids' photographers just had a good run with Johnson and Johnson. So there was lots of like,
that's nice.
Going to LA, lots of talent. It was kids, but with kids, it's harder because you have even more crew because you've got the on-set nurse and the teacher and the baby wrangler or whatever the case may be. So, and lots of backups. So there was lots and lots of people on those sets.
Thank God for the baby wranglers.
Oh yeah.
Kid wranglers.
Well, it's funny, this particular photographer would always have a run-in with a baby wrangler because he was very engaged with the talent.
Oh, okay.
And he felt like it was a distraction. He'd be like, just give me a minute. And I was like, okay.
They do get up on your ass though. I mean, they are like right on top of you.
Yeah. And I think that, they take pride in their job. So they don't want to just hang around. I'm here to do something.
Right.
But you do have to get in a flow if you're shooting kids with the baby wrangler, because they can distract the kid from what you're trying to get them to do with your camera. So it's almost like you have to have a debrief with your baby wrangler at the beginning. Like, here's how I work. Here's what I need from you. Like, obviously safety first with this kid and everything, but I need you to work in sync with my camera and my vibe, what I'm going for.
Sometimes I want to be like, and maybe one or two less cups of coffee or whatever you're on to get kind of energy.
They're all like, the voices like that is a very good point. I never thought about that. I was like, did you have a quad shot?
Yeah, because my first thought, the very first time I worked with one, I was like, how the hell do you have that kind of energy? And it lasts all day long. Do you go home and just crash hard or what? Because I don't have that kind of personality, that kind of energy. So I was just amazed.
Yeah.
At that.
Well, and for anybody who says you don't need those people, well, first of all, you have to have them on set by law in most states, but yeah, you need them. We had a set. We were shooting at Splashlight Studios, and the Wrangler was chatting it up with the parents, and All of a sudden, one of the toddlers was behind a flat, dipped a hand in yellow paint.
Oh.
And we were like, luckily it was like water-based paint. We called poison control, like everything, all's well that ends well, as they say, I guess. But I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
You need to be focused on your job. Because I remember seeing her over like chatting with the parents. And I'm like, yeah, but the kid is dead.
There.
One full fist down in full bright yellow paint too. Because those sets were always, I guess it was a softer yellow, but in camera, it softens. So it was a bright yellow paint and always blue. But yeah, yellow paint. I mean, it looked appetizing, I guess.
But then it's a kid, so kids do their own little thing. What's been your favorite job so far?
Oh, that's a tough one. Because there's some jobs that have been hard that have also been, once they've wrapped, have been satisfying. There was definitely a really big job that we did in LA for Electrolux. That was 2 weeks. It was a full week in studio and then a full week on location. And it was challenging, but I think as a rep, what felt good about it, like I picked up and flew out there because of some issues. And it's not like I saved the day or anything. I was out there to provide support, but I feel like for me, that was a great shoot because I feel like it validated everything you're supposed to be and feel as a rep, because there was a full team, producer, all that stuff. But I came out there to like comfort the client, make sure the photographer was also comforted, and the producer was feeling horrible. It just was like, there's lots of tension and lots of stuff. Yeah. And again, it's not like I swooped in and saved the day or anything, but there was just coming in and easing of tension across the board that was very satisfying for me. It's something I pride myself on, and I really love being a diplomat. Maybe in another life I would have been like a negotiator, or like a, talking people off ledges. I feel like I'd do that anyway.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I would think you have some of that in your life already.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, that's cool though. Do you go on a lot of sets, or do you mostly stick around the office?
I used to. I think, the past couple of years with COVID have made it impossible. Most stuff is remote anyway. But I used to definitely go as much as I could. One of our photographers would shoot a lot in Chicago, and any chance I had to go to those, I was like, I'm coming. Wow. But, obviously with COVID and everything, and since my husband passed away, being here with my son, it's challenging. It was adding insult to injury in this whole mess that we're all in, that now I've got this added stress. But, everyone has been very supportive. And I think being remote and getting things rolling and then making sure they're wrapped and I've definitely joined a bunch of shoots on Zoom if I can. I produced a whole shoot on Zoom last January. I was like, woo. And it was my first one back from losing my husband. So it was intense because it was just putting that hat back on after laying low for 4 months. Yeah. Or 3 months, I guess. And it was intense, but we did it. And it was an awesome project. It was really, the whole team was amazing.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's good. I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah.
So you moved from the city, right?
Yeah. Well, we still have an apartment, and, our bar, my husband's bar, is still in New York City. Okay. I have an apartment right around the corner from that. And
the bar is the Folly, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The Folly. Such a fun spot. A great location too.
Where is it?
There. It's on Houston Street.
Yeah.
It's in the Village.
Yeah. My cousin lives right there, basically second in Houston-ish.
Second.
In Houston. So it's like Second Avenue.
Okay.
Yeah. He basically lives at Second and Second, more or less. Is pretty much where he lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. There used to be like a Hare Krishna place out front.
I think I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and then the apartment building was behind that. So you had to walk through a door that was right next to the little Hare Krishna place, and then you would walk through a courtyard, and then you walk into his building and go up there.
Yeah. We're on 3rd and McDougal Street.
Okay.
It's great, very loud. I mean, I think it gives Times Square a run for its money at 5 a.m. when all the drunks are coming out of the bars. Yeah. But, Loki was born in that apartment, and I think he could sleep through anything, because
how about that?
Little baby sleeping right above all that noise. But yeah, it's a really fun neighborhood. And being that close to Washington Square Park is great. It's a
Mhm.
wonderful location. So, we have the apartment there still. And I think during COVID, having a house and a yard and some space,
Yeah. Oh,
because
yeah.
if the three of us had been, and my dog had been in that apartment during COVID,
Yeah. Yeah.
none of us might be here right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, having the house was really great. So we bought a house in Richmond, Virginia, and I've really liked being sort of in between work and my family. So my family's in North Carolina. This is right in the center of the two, so it's perfect. And getting to New York is so easy. It really is.
Yeah, even with me down in Charlotte, I tell everybody, it's like, if you need me in the city, if you need me
Yeah.
in New York, I literally can be there 5 hours at the most, because there's a flight leaving from Charlotte to New York like every hour and a half or something like that. Yeah.
Well, it's probably easier for you than it is even for me, because I don't even think the Richmond airport, the flight from here is an hour. Like, it's something ridiculous. It's so fast. But, this isn't as big as Charlotte. Charlotte's airport is huge. And here, I think that you get a flight and you're like $600 just to go to New York. That's crazy. Or so, it's just not as feasible as, say, taking the train or just driving. I'd usually just drive.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's what, 5 hours or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if we looked up state at houses, and I thought where we were looking, I said, well, that's 2.5 hours, but with traffic, it's practically 4.5. I said, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's just the same commute. So.
Yeah, Tammy and I were looking at houses. We're thinking about moving to New York right after, I guess, or right after Alexa, my oldest, was born. And I looked at what it would cost me to move up somewhere even within an hour of the city, and what I would get for.
Yeah.
Or I was like, there's no way. I might as well just stay down here as opposed to doing that. It's ridiculous. And it's just getting worse.
It is. Well, I mean, I think I'm seeing so much real estate on the market right now, and it's just funny what we're used to. And then you get these buildings coming in your inbox and you're like, $5.5 million. Woo.
Yeah.
A lot of money.
Oh yeah. 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 My friend moved out from up there, and he was in I think they were going up on this rent. It was a doorman building. He was on the first floor, had a little patio, but it was literally a studio apartment with a little bedroom area carved out and a little kitchen. And I think it was going to $3,500, and it was probably, I want to say 500 square feet, maybe something like that, with plus the patio.
Well, I think that's what was happening with us. We were in Brooklyn in a 2-bedroom, because once Loki was starting to walk, I said, we need a bigger place. So McDougal Street, we've always had, my husband had that apartment since the early 90s with his brother. And, I was like, we're going to outgrow this when Loki starts moving around. He's not like tucked in a corner. But so we moved there, and it was the same thing. We signed a 2-year lease. We sublet McDougal Street. And then we essentially, when we looked at what the renewal was going to be, we were like, okay, let's do this math. The rent was already 35 or 36. And then we were looking, plus, all the amenities in the building. It was one of those, like you said, doorman building and all that. And I was like, it's going to go up. And so now we're going to be paying $4,000 plus.
Yeah.
And we're not going to own anything. I said, that just sucks now. We have this young kid, and what are we doing? Are we going to buy anything? And we just, when we started looking upstate, I love upstate. I mean, Catskills, Hudson, all of it. But I just felt like I didn't want to get stuck in the winters. We were just trying to figure out, to be honest with you, my husband picked Richmond, and to this day, I'm not exactly sure why. I know one of his favorite bands is from Richmond, but I kind of thought about it, and I was like, you know what? Sure. Let's just give it a try.
Well, you're right there with Martin Agency, so you can always go knock on their door and hit them up.
Exactly. I do. Constantly. And I did before we lived here too. We traveled down by the train and came to meet with them. And I just saw an art producer friend of mine who was there just got another job just yesterday, I think. So.
Seems to be happening a lot with people I've noticed in the last year or so. They're all kind of moving around agency to agency, or freelancing now or whatever.
Yeah. Well, the most daunting challenge in our industry right now is finding where people are, for sure. Because, during COVID, people have done what, I'm doing, which is being a little more remote, looking outside of cities for places to live potentially. And, it is, as long as you can get where you need to go in a convenient way, I think that we really can be anywhere now. My stylist, the manager of my stylist division, he was the first to sort of depart from our New York office. And I remember thinking, this doesn't have to mean a departure from the agency. We're going to figure out how this works. And when he moved, it was seamless. It's just we communicated in a different way and a little more efficiently too, if I'm honest. Because when
I've
you're in
heard
the
that.
office, you take for granted that someone's there. It's like, oh, I'll talk to them later. And I think we're a lot more organized about the way we communicate because we are in different places. So he was like the test. He went away and I was like, okay, I think if Willie can do this, I'm going to give this a shot too. So then we bought our house. And then our senior agent, Kimberly, they just bought a house in Cortland Manor, I think it's Cortland Manor in upstate New York. So Westchester. So I think all of us were, finding our personal happiness. And I think we're all better agents for that.
Yeah.
I strongly believe if I let people who work for and with me, if there's this freedom to have personal, fulfillment, I think we're all better people for that. We would give a lot more to our jobs that way.
I think you're right. I've heard a lot of that from different people, that it's actually this whole remote thing has worked. There's multiple agency, like producers and creative directors and multiple agencies I've talked to have been like, we've had some of the best, this is one of our best years ever, because they're like, we don't really know why, but everybody's working more efficiently or whatever it is. They're like, we've increased by this percentage this year over the last 5 years or whatever it is. So I can definitely see. And my brother's an architect, and he said during lockdown, they were having the best year they've ever had.
Wow.
Yeah. And they were all working remote.
Yeah. And I think barring, COVID itself, and the risk of illness and that sort of stuff. I mean, there are fewer obstacles to just producing when you're remote, because it's not coordinating schedules and getting everybody to a place. It's where people doing things in place.
Yeah,
was key. It was amazing.
Yeah, I think it's good and bad. It's had its good parts and its rough parts for sure.
Yeah, no, I definitely miss seeing people. I want to travel and meet with clients again and all that stuff too.
So tell me, if somebody's looking for a rep, photographer, stylist, whoever, what would be your advice for them on how to find a rep? And give me a little bit of the details of, actually, for somebody who's never had one, what are the details of like getting a rep when it comes down to like the division of work? Like, what do you want the person you're repping to do, what you do, and then how the money works on that? Because I think there's some who think, oh, I'm going to go in there and it's 10%, because they hear about movie managers or whatever, and that's what they get.
Yeah.
But just tell me a little bit about that.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think a rep is really a partner, it's having a partnership. So it is a little different than sort of, definitely very different from the talent world. Although, in talent, I don't know if they take a percentage from, they get a 20% agency fee, but I don't know if they take anything from the fees. Cause I know with a lot of styling, there is a 20% agency fee and then there's a 15% cut to the commission. So I don't know, but in terms of, finding a rep, I think reps are always looking for artists that are obviously commercially viable. Like there's something that they can sink their teeth in to market, and that there is a market if it's, creative and beautiful work and it has a place. I think any rep who has their finger on the pulse of that particular, genre of work, that's what you're looking for. You want to find a rep who seems to have knowledge of what you're doing. As I said before, when I was trying to do some fashion, I realized it's not really my wheelhouse. So that's an important admission to make. When you're not a good fit, you just have to you want people to succeed. So, finding people who align with the kind of work you're trying to do, is super key. It's also a relationship. So most reps are doing things just about the same way. So I think at the end of the day, I've learned this in my last couple of years of connecting with so many other reps. Sometimes we're working in these little silos and you don't know, am I doing this differently than so-and-so? Right. And the more we talk, the more I realize, we are all kind of doing this the same way. So really it's about who you connect with. It's about having a good communication and a good relationship with the person you're working with, knowing that the way they speak, their vibe is appropriately speaking for you. Some people want someone who's just curt and to the point in business, and some people want someone who's a little more approachable, which is kind of how my agency is. We're a little more approachable and we don't make anybody feel like we're not getting out of bed for less than 10 grand,
right.
kind of thing, and we're realistic with people. We're happy to educate clients, especially if they're startups or small. So, I think it just depends. If you want somebody to just weed all that out and be curt, it's probably not us. We're going to bring
Right.
everybody in and say, well, it sounds like you might not have the budget for this now, but, we're just kind to everyone. So I think you find the kind of relationship you want, what you want out of it, and then align yourself with that kind of rep, looking at the roster that they have. That's just basic stuff. And what, once the relationship starts, the division of work is such that, you both have to be reaching out to people. You don't suddenly stop everything you were doing before. And certainly if you weren't doing anything before, maybe you wouldn't get the rep, because the rep wants to know that you're doing stuff.
Right.
I've certainly heard stories of reps who are like, listen, you need to be billing a certain amount per year before we can take you on. I haven't heard that in a while, but when I heard that once, I went, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, I've heard that before too.
Yeah. Well, and I think I understand what that's about a little bit, because if we are not, one, getting a part of what you're bringing to the table, we're not getting paid at all. Right. So then you've got a whole group of people. And in my case, all 5 of my employees, myself included, are working for all the artists, and it's free if there's no exchange of money there. So that's when photographers come in saying, what about house accounts? I'm like, yeah, that's not a thing. And here's why. But we'll certainly negotiate if somebody's had a client for like 5 years, and, maybe we'll do a lower thing for a year, or say, look, for 6 months, we'll stay hands off. Maybe it's not worth our time, but let's see what happens. But it does take, a good amount of time to get someone up and running and start to get inquiries coming in.
Yeah. So do you guys take 25%? Or do you, okay. Cause I've heard some like, oh, we take 30%, and some like we take 25%. I haven't heard anybody other than like modeling agencies or whatever take 20%. Like, so I know if some photographers are like, oh, it's 20%. It's like, not really. I think it's 25 to 30, but.
Yeah. And I think that, I'd be interested to hear. I only know a couple of agencies personally that take 30%. And I don't know if there's an increase in what they cover for that, but I do know that, there's just a lot of work that goes into what we do. And a lot of it's unpaid, and a lot of it is thankless, and a lot of it is not even visible all the time. I've got this list that I crank through, every morning. It's making sure there are a certain amount of emails that go out to old clients for follow-up. Then, and sometimes it's late at night scheduling them. I have an email scheduler, so I'll sit down and that I can they just roll out in the morning, and I just wait for them to respond. Right. But because just sometimes it's once Loki goes to bed, I can sit down and, I just have a little more free time hobbling around upstairs. So sometimes I'll do that. But lately I've been just super fresh in the morning. It's been like, wake up as soon as he gets on that bus. I don't even wait for it to be, quote unquote office hours. I just dive in, and I'm not sending anybody an email at 7 a.m., but I'm at least composing it. Right. But so, there's a whole list of things that we're doing behind the scenes and research, and, sometimes we're paying other people. So there's a lot of investment on our side that I think is not always totally visible. But
I know some photographers I've talked to who hadn't had a rep yet. They go, oh, so if I get a rep, then I'm going to just hang out and just shoot. I don't have to do anything else. And I don't know. It doesn't really work like that. You got to keep trying to do your things. I try and make it more of a partnership where we kind of split up what we're doing. Maybe I'll send out some emails and they'll do a follow-up on that, or they'll send out an email and then maybe I'll do a follow-up on that.
Yeah, that's important, because if you think about us reaching out to people over and over again, there's only so much you can say, and only so many ways you can say it. Yeah. So eventually the key point is to have good talking points, and just to always have something to say and not be so repetitive. It's like, any news, he's still there. Right. Hello. It just, I know how busy people are, and especially people who take their jobs very seriously, even if they're not responding to you, that constant dig it's affecting them, So I think just being as respectful as you can about the outreach, and knowing that they're receiving it, they're probably just really busy, and checking in, as much as, seems as much as you would want to get a sales or a junk call. Right. Just think of it that way. Not to say that we're, spam or anything, but I at least use that as a barometer of like, you know what, if someone was calling me this much, I'd probably be, annoyed. And I think by sharing that responsibility, the photographer can say things in a different way. Like, hey, I know my agent reached out a couple of weeks ago. I just wanted to personally say hello, or vice versa. Hey, I know that, Mark reached out and I thought I would follow up and introduce myself. I think there are ways to communicate that and keep things moving. So it's not like just you all the time going, oh, I'm still here. Hi.
Right.
Anyone?
Yeah. I think you got to find that balance between irritating the hell out of them, but keeping your name in front of them enough that when something pops up, because I ran a new faces division at a tiny little agency for about a year. And I realized that if I hadn't talked to a model in 6 months and a job came in, all the models who had reached out to me in the last month are the ones I'm like grabbing cards and throwing in there. I'm like, hey, here, check out these people, check out these models. So I kind of understand it.
We have no control over when something appropriate comes across their desk for us. And so that is why it's important to, stay in touch just enough and keep your work fresh and keep shooting new work all the time. I mean, talk about division of responsibilities. That's definitely important. It's like, give us new work. We want new stuff all the time. Yeah. I've got one photographer that I can feel, I share her work all the time because she makes it so easy, because she's constantly shooting and constantly sharing. And for other people, I might have to create that whole thing. It's like, in order to start something, I have to sit down and create it. And she just happens to make it easy, because it's like, great, we have this, we're going to roll this out. And then all the marketing happens because she's like, here. And I think sometimes but we're also here for the strategy. I mean, we're also here for hey, there hasn't been anything new. Let's talk about what we can do. So we're also here for that too. But we feel it when there's certain people who are like, oh, and then this can roll out and this can roll out. It just keeps going. And you're like, but it's always the same couple of people. And, we want to make sure everyone's getting that attention and that, marketing effort.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had one where I went and met a client, and I just kind of stayed on them occasionally. But it took 5 years. But after 5 years, job came up, clicked, and I was out in LA. I mean, they literally called me on a Friday and it's like, can you be here Sunday? Yeah. It was a last minute thing. They just decided to shoot.
Yeah. Well, and I think as long as it can take to actually finally land it, another really important thing is when you have stuff that's regular and keeping you busy, it's imperative that you maintain this momentum, because it takes one little, like, you've got this wheel turning, right? You're doing these jobs. Takes one little cog just to throw it off balance. Like, they shift focus. They go, we're going to go in a different direction. Yeah. And suddenly that kind of comfortable amount of work you've had has been thrown for a loop. I had a photographer who was working constantly for 3 different catalogs, and he was on their cycle, like 3 years running, like just constantly. And I was like, we really have to think about maintaining your momentum and diversifying here, because it starts to get a little scary. I said, all it takes is one of them to push you off that cycle, bring in somebody new. And I said, and what happens if it's 2 of them? And sure enough, the following year, it was 2 of them. And it was a disaster. It was like, oh my God, just having to start that momentum again. Yeah. Think about anything, if you're rolling and then you have to go, it's easier. But if you start from a standstill, it is hard as hell.
Yeah. I learned that lesson years and years ago. I had a client, I was shooting for them a ton, to the point where I really didn't need any other clients, and I kind of let everything else slip. And then when they filed for bankruptcy, that was it.
Yeah. I mean, and listen, it's easy to get comfortable. It's a hard business. One of the things, I did an Instagram takeover for Focus on Women, and a photographer friend had said she had taken a little hiatus from burnout and stuff. And I'd like to even see how I put it, but I wrote something, and as it came out of me, I was like, that is exactly how it feels. It was something to the effect of, every request, let's see if I can find it, but it comes with this crazy urgency, and that every rejection is like career ending doom, So yeah.
But yeah, that sounds about right. Okay, well, I'm gonna let you go, but I got one last question.
Yeah.
What's the strangest thing or best story you got that's happened to you since you started in this business?
Strangest thing. Gosh. Well, I don't know if this is, no, I guess this is pretty strange. And it was something that it rattled me a bit, but again, gave me this sense of, feeling validated as my role as a rep. We did this project with a photographer, and it was another one of those big jobs, lots of talent, big set build. And I remember I just last year shredded these binders. These jobs, I would turn them in binders. That's how we would build them. We would send a 3-ring binder in with like tabs of like, here's the talent, here's this. Now it's all digital, but at the time I just shredded them. I was like, all right, it's time to let these go. But that particular job, we went in, we had a purchase order, everything was all set. It was for 2 years of usage, and it was right before the holidays too. And I guess at some point, their usage needs changed. Nobody told us, and the purchase order wasn't changed. We did the job, billed for 2 years, and 60 days after payment, not after the job, after payment, we were contacted and said, well, this was a mistake. The client only wanted 1 year. And I'm like, but I'm looking at the paperwork and it says 2. My estimate said 2, like everything was 2 years.
Right.
And we had been paid for 2 years, and all that money was out. Like the photographer had his fee, like it was done. And the strangest thing was that we were being asked to sort of eat this in a way, like to issue a credit to the agency, when I was like, but this wasn't our mistake. Like it felt rotten, and I just had to stand up for that. I'm like, I'm sorry, we can't. It's like, tell the client they have an extra year. I don't know what to tell you. And it was so odd. And it was my first, feeling of like, wow, this can really get just kicked down the road from client to agency to like lowly us. Like, what are we? It's just like, I can't afford to eat that and have my photographer return that year of usage. It's back when usage for like 10 grand, I was like, no, it's been 50 days.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It was nuts.
I can't believe they even asked after that.
Yeah, we ended up negotiating with them because there was another project, and we tried to help them from a relationship perspective, offset it, but it was through another project. So like, we're not writing you a check. We can't do that. But there was something that we ended up, it was a long conversation with me and the photographer, and it went on for months. We were like, I don't know what to do. Do we want to maintain this? So just, again, diplomat here, trying to figure out both sides. And I think what we did was we ended up issuing kind of like a credit against the next project, but it was not for the full amount. It was like, we'll help you guys offset that loss, because clearly the client was going to tell them, nope, we're only paying for 1 year. That's what we asked for.
Right.
And I was like, well, don't kick that down to us. Our PO says 2 years.
Yeah.
So it was a mess. It was just a mess. But I think we got through it. And I think even the art producer and I have long since, made amends. I think we've all gone through the shit in the industry at some point or another. Some disasters happen to all of us. We're all human at the end of it. It's another thing that my life in the last 2 years has uncovered. I'm like, behind these lenses, behind these screens, we're all human beings. And at the end of the day, that has to come first. And yes, it's business, but forgive, move on, keep trucking, all that stuff.
Yep, I agree. Well, Mary, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. This was cool.
Oh, thank you. I love it's conversational, which I love to do. We're none of us getting out of the house very much.
Yes, I know. Yeah. Yeah.